Alma was born on a gray morning when the rain wouldn't stop weeping. Her mother said the skies cried because they already knew how hard life would be for her. That wasn't said with love, but with resentment, a sentiment Alma would grow up recognizing in her mother's eyes and her father's sighs. She came into the world like any other child, but something about her arrival had always seemed like a misfortune, a mistake to be tolerated rather than a blessing to be celebrated. The village where Alma grew up was small, hidden behind folds of hills and surrounded by pine forests that whispered secrets no one dared speak aloud. People there lived by rules older than stone, where women were judged by the children they bore and the meals they cooked, and men by the land they worked and the heirs they produced. Love was never the priority. Function was. Alma didn't know what affection looked like, not in her home, not in her neighbors' homes. She thought that perhaps tenderness was just a story someone made up, like fairies or dragons. What she knew was routine, silence, chores, obedience. As a child, she had been ill often, always pale, coughing through winter nights while her mother muttered prayers and her father stood at the door, arms crossed, impatient. A high fever had nearly taken her when she was 8. She remembered the chills, the pain in her stomach, the blood on her sheets. After that illness, something changed. Her body never grew like the other girls. She was small for her age, thin and tired-looking. The village healer whispered things her mother didn't want to hear. At 12, when the other girls began to bloom like flowers in spring, Alma remained untouched by nature. By 15, the truth arrived in a cold, clinical voice from an elder midwife. Alma would never bear children. She didn't understand the weight of those words at first. She blinked at the woman's wrinkled face and looked over at her mother, who stood frozen with lips pressed so tightly they turned white. The walk home was silent. Her mother didn't speak to her for 2 days. Her father didn't even look at her. From then on, things shifted. If her mother had been cold before, she became ice. If her father had once tolerated her presence, now he seemed repulsed by it. Alma began to realize what she had become in their eyes. Useless. A daughter who couldn't become a wife. A girl who couldn't produce sons. An empty vessel. The village didn't need to be told. News, like illness, spread fast in places with little else to do. Women glanced at her with tight smiles. Girls giggled behind her back. Boys ignored her. She felt like she carried something foul in her shadow, something everyone could smell. When she walked past the well or the baker's stand, the air changed. Her name became a whisper, a warning. Still, Alma tried to be good. She rose early to fetch water, cleaned the floors until her hands were red, and prepared meals she never ate first. She stitched clothes for her father and boiled herbs for her mother's aching knees. She never complained. She thought maybe if she was useful in other ways they would keep her, they would see her. But usefulness was not enough in a place where a woman's womb was her only dowry. One evening she heard them talking through the wall. Her mother's voice sharp like broken glass, her father's quiet and resolute. She eats our food. She gives nothing in return. She's your daughter. She's no one's daughter. She's a burden. Alma held her breath as the words clamped around her ribs. That night, she didn't cry. She never cried anymore. Tears were for people who hoped someone might hear them. Weeks passed in uneasy quiet. Her parents acted no differently, but there was something in the way they looked at her, like they were waiting for something. Then one morning, her mother handed her a dress she'd never seen before. It was nicer than any Alma had ever worn, soft blue linen with a lace collar. "Put this on," her mother said. "Why?" "We're having a visitor." Alma obeyed. She always obeyed. When the man arrived, she thought he was her uncle at first. He was too old to be interested in a girl like her. His beard was thick and gray, his hands calloused and covered in rings. He smelled of oil and tobacco. He didn't speak much. He looked at her the way someone inspects a goat at market. Later that night, after he left, her father counted coins at the table. Her mother poured tea with trembling hands. The next morning, Alma was told she would be leaving in 2 days. "Where?" she asked. "To be a wife." her mother said without looking up. "He's rich. He'll feed you, but I don't. Why would he want me?" Her father looked up sharply. "Don't ask questions. This is your chance." Alma didn't sleep that night. Her fingers dug into the mattress until her nails split. She stared at the ceiling and imagined disappearing into the beams, becoming dust, vanishing. But she didn't fight. What was there to fight for? Her parents had already erased her. She was no longer a daughter, just a trade. The journey to the man's estate took 2 days. A stranger escorted her. The man, she didn't yet know his name, lived on the edge of a neighboring town in a stone house too large for one person. He didn't speak to her when she arrived, only nodded toward a servant who led her to a room in the basement. It wasn't a bedroom. There was no bed, just a mat on the floor, a thin blanket, a jug of water. That night, he told her the rules. You will cook, you will clean, you will not speak unless spoken to. You belong to me now. You're lucky I took you in. Alma nodded, not because she agreed, because fear makes obedience easier. Days turned into weeks. Her hands became raw from scrubbing floors. She learned to move in silence, to disappear in doorways, to avoid the blow of a thrown object by reading the twitch of his fingers. He never struck her, but his words did. They followed her into sleep, echoing through dreams. He called her broken thing, useless doll, failed woman. He laughed when she flinched. Sometimes he brought men to the house. He never introduced her. She served them food and then waited downstairs, heart pounding, unsure of what her fate might be that day. She missed the children's laughter she used to hear outside the village school. She missed the taste of honey. She missed sunlight on her face. But more than anything, she missed the feeling of being a person. In stolen moments, Alma would sit in the corner of the cold basement room and trace memories on the wall with her finger. She imagined being held, being called by name with kindness. Her mind built fantasies so vivid they hurt. A warm cabin, a gentle voice, children who smiled when they saw her. Then came the night he brought papers. He was drunk, holding a wine-stained sheet in one hand and a coin purse in the other. "I've had an offer," he slurred. "A man wants to take you to the city. He thinks you're pretty. What do I care if you're barren? There's money in pretty faces." Alma froze. Her chest felt tight, like the room had shrunk. "No," she said softly. He laughed. "What was that?" "No," she repeated, louder now. He stepped toward her, eyes narrow. "You think you have a say?" She did not sleep that night. She lay awake, eyes open in the dark, the blanket pulled up to her chin, though the room was warm. Her heart beat like a trapped bird. At dawn, while he slept in a wine-drenched haze, Alma moved. Quietly, slowly. She took the blanket and wrapped it around herself. She didn't take food. She didn't have time. She slipped out the back door and into the misty morning like a ghost. The woods waited like a hungry mouth. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to run. Her bare feet bled on the rocks. Her body trembled from cold and fear. But she didn't stop. Trees blurred past. The sky turned pale blue, then gray again. She heard wolves in the distance. She fell once, twice, scraped her knees but rose each time. By nightfall, Alma's limbs were jelly. Her lips cracked, her vision blurred. Still, she pressed on. The thought of being sold again was worse than any wild animal or storm. Finally, when her legs would no longer carry her, she collapsed at the edge of a dirt path winding between 2 hills. The world tilted. She reached out, touched a patch of moss, and whispered a name she didn't know. Perhaps her own. Perhaps someone she hadn't met yet. Then everything went black. The forest was silent, except for the low hum of wind winding through the pines. Somewhere in the distance, a raven called once and was answered. Snowflakes had started to fall gently, though it was only early autumn. Alma lay crumpled on the side of the road like a forgotten piece of cloth, her body curled inward, as if trying to protect itself from a world that had long stopped caring whether she lived or died. Silas had been hauling logs since before sunrise. His boots were caked in mud and pine needles. his gloves stained from days of chopping. He was a quiet man by nature, tall and thick-built, with a heavy beard that masked most of his expressions. He didn't often come into town unless it was to trade, and even then he preferred to speak with as few words as necessary. His grief made conversation difficult, and grief, in his case, was no temporary visitor. It was a constant companion since his wife passed, leaving him with 4 children and a hollowness he tried to ignore by working until his muscles screamed. When he spotted the form on the ground, he thought it was an animal at first, something small, wrapped in dark cloth. It wasn't until he moved closer, the reins of his mule clutched in one hand, that he saw the outline of a human body. A girl, a young woman, barely more than skin and bone. Her face was streaked with dirt, her lips dry and cracked. She didn't stir even as he knelt beside her and touched her shoulder. He looked around. No one, not even a trail of footprints. Just her, lying in the cold like she belonged to the earth. "You're not going to last out here," he muttered under his breath. He didn't think. He simply acted. With surprising gentleness for a man so rough, he lifted her into the cart, wrapped his own coat around her, and urged the mule forward. The trip home was slow. Her head lolled against the boards. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days, maybe longer. Her fingernails were torn, her dress filthy. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. The cabin sat tucked behind a curtain of trees, with smoke rising faintly from the stone chimney. It was no mansion, but it was sturdy and clean. The porch creaked as he stepped onto it with her in his arms. He opened the door with a nudge of his foot. "Ellie," he called, his voice low but firm. The girl who appeared was maybe 10 years old, with dark hair braided back and a dish rag still in her hand. "Get blankets," he said, "and warm water. Now." She stared at the woman in his arms but didn't argue. Ellie had seen enough in the last 2 years to know when something serious was happening. She vanished down the hallway, calling to her brothers and little sister as she went. Soon, the cabin filled with hurried steps, the clatter of a kettle being filled, the rustling of linens. Silas placed the girl on the small cot in the spare room. It had been empty for months. Once it had been his wife's reading corner. Now it waited like a ghost, holding nothing but dust and silence. He laid the girl down and peeled back the blanket to assess her injuries. There were bruises on her arms, deep and old, blisters on her feet, bleeding. Her cheeks were sunken. She was barely breathing. He wasn't a doctor. He didn't know what to do. But he remembered how his wife used to speak softly to the children when they were sick, how she would wipe their foreheads and hum until they drifted off. So he did just that. He wrung a warm cloth and dabbed it on her temples. He didn't hum. He didn't know how, but he stayed by her side until her eyes fluttered open just long enough to whisper something that made no sense. "Don't sell me," she rasped, and then she passed out again. The days that followed moved slowly. Alma drifted in and out of fevered sleep, her body weak and trembling. The children took turns watching her, though mostly it was Ellie who sat with a book in her lap, whispering stories while the others played outside. Silas kept working, but he came in more often now, his brow creased with thought. He didn't know her name. She hadn't spoken again. On the 4th day, she sat up. It was sudden, jarring, as though her mind had caught up with her body and realized she wasn't dead. Her eyes darted around the room, wide and wild. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. Ellie was the one who caught her. "Careful," she said softly. "You're safe." Alma stared at her. The girl looked kind, but so had others once. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a croak came out. "You want water?" Ellie asked. "I'll get some." Silas stepped into the doorway before Ellie could move. His arms were folded, eyes steady. "She needs food," he said. "Get some broth." Alma blinked. This man. She remembered his face now. The one who had picked her up, who hadn't spoken, who hadn't hit her. She tried to speak. "Where?" "You're in my home," he said. "I found you near the road. You were half dead." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why bring me?" He shrugged. Didn't see a reason not to. The honesty startled her, more than kindness would have. She nodded once, too tired to argue. The days turned into weeks. Alma slowly regained her strength, though her legs still trembled when she stood too long. She said little. She ate in silence. She kept her head down. But the children, those children, wore down her walls. Jonas, the second oldest, was curious and chatty. He would sit near her while she mended a torn sock or peeled carrots, asking question after question about where she was from, what her favorite color was, whether she knew how to whistle. Micah, younger and quieter, simply liked to be nearby, often crawling under the table with a toy and resting against her legs. Lottie, the baby, would waddle in and hold out a toy, her big eyes shining with pride, expecting praise. Alma didn't know what to do with their love. It came without price. It asked for nothing. She waited for the catch, for Silas to hand her a list of chores, to tell her what he expected in return. But it never came. She tried to leave one morning. Her legs were stronger now, her dress washed and patched. She folded the blanket she'd been given, set it on the cot, and opened the front door quietly. It creaked. Silas was chopping wood just a few yards away. He didn't look up. "Going somewhere?" he asked. She froze. "I've stayed too long," she said. "I can't repay you." He lowered the axe and turned. "Did I ask for payment?" "No, but you can walk if you want to," he said. "But there's snow coming tonight. You won't get far, and the children will ask about you. I don't want to be a burden." He looked at her then, really looked. "You think being here makes you a burden?" She didn't answer. "I got 4 children who eat like wolves, a roof that leaks every spring, and a town full of busybodies who think I'm losing my mind. You making soup once in a while isn't the thing that's going to break me." Alma swallowed hard. "I don't know how to stay," she whispered. Silas nodded. "Then just don't leave yet." That night, as she tucked Lottie into bed and listened to Ellie read aloud from an old book, Alma felt something strange settle in her chest. It wasn't safety. Not yet. But it was something close. Something warm. She dreamed of pine trees and quiet laughter. By the end of the second month, she had her own spot at the table. No one questioned it. She began helping more, fixing tears in the children's clothes, organizing the root cellar, teaching Ellie how to make bread without burning the crust. Silas didn't say much, but he watched her with quiet eyes that held no judgment. The townspeople began to talk. Alma heard it when she accompanied Silas to trade firewood. Women eyed her. Men whispered. One muttered loud enough for her to hear, "Guess he's found himself a new one." She flinched. Silas looked at her. "Ignore them. They think. I don't care what they think." But she did. That night she stayed up late, sitting outside the cabin under the stars, the cold creeping through her shawl. She thought about running again. Not because she was mistreated, but because the voice in her head wouldn't let her believe she deserved this peace. Silas joined her after a while, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to her, then sat on the steps beside her. "You don't talk much about where you came from." "No," she said. "You don't have to. But if it's eating you up, you should know no one here is expecting you to be anyone you're not." Alma sipped the tea. It was warm and a little bitter. "I can't have children," she said suddenly, the words torn from her like a wound breaking open. "That's why I was sold, why my family gave me away. I can't." Silas didn't move. "I thought if I kept it a secret, maybe I could stay a little longer. But they'll find out. They always do." Silas stared ahead into the darkness. "You think these 4 are blood of my blood." She turned to look at him. "My wife couldn't have children either," he said. "We took in the ones no one else wanted. Now they're mine. They always were." Alma felt her throat tighten. "So no," he said. "I don't care about that." She couldn't speak. Her eyes burned. For the first time in years, she let herself cry. Not from pain, but from the strange, aching beginning of something like healing. The mornings had begun to carry the scent of pine smoke and rising bread. Birds still sang in the trees, and the woods buzzed with the last desperate energy of autumn. The cabin was filled with sounds Alma had grown to recognize by heart. Lottie's babbling before dawn, the thump of Micah's boots hitting the floor when he jumped from bed, the scrape of Ellie's wooden spoon stirring oats, and the rhythmic creak of Silas's chair on the porch as he sipped his coffee and watched the treetops. These noises no longer startled her. They folded around her like a blanket, familiar and steady. Alma had begun to move through the house as though she belonged. She hadn't said it aloud, and no one had forced the question, but there was something unspoken among them now. She was no longer just the girl who had arrived half dead. She was Miss Alma to the children, and her hands knew where every cup and bowl belonged. When Lottie scraped her knee, it was Alma's arms she ran to. When Ellie struggled to hem her dress, she came to Alma for help. Even Micah, shy and slow to speak, had begun to sit beside her during meals, resting his head against her arm with a silent trust that made her chest ache. Silas remained quiet, as always, but something in his eyes had changed. He lingered longer in the doorway when Alma told bedtime stories. His voice, when he spoke to her, was softer than it had been in those first days. Not warm, but less guarded, like a man who didn't know how to reach for something but wanted to try. One evening, as the fire crackled and Ellie swept the corners of the room, Alma sat sewing by lamplight while the younger children played on the floor. Silas walked in from outside, shaking snow from his shoulders. "First frost," he said, brushing it off his coat. Alma looked up. "Already?" He nodded. "Winter'll come fast this year." Ellie looked at the door. "We'll need to gather more kindling, and the root cellar isn't full." "I'll take care of it tomorrow," Silas said. "Alma, you mind showing Ellie how to sort the jars tonight?" She nodded without hesitation. It had become natural. Silas giving quiet suggestions, Alma answering with action. Later, as the children slept and the wind howled faintly through the trees, Alma remained by the hearth, watching the flames flicker low. Silas entered the room, a mug in his hand. "You're not sleeping?" She shook her head. "Not yet." He sat across from her, his boots planted wide apart, the silence between them stretching like a bridge that neither was sure how to cross. "You've been working hard," he said. "I like being useful." "You've been more than that." She looked at her lap, her fingers tightened around the thread. "I never meant to stay this long." He didn't respond at first. "Do you want to leave?" he asked finally. Her throat tightened. "I don't know. Part of me thinks I should." "Why?" She swallowed. "Because good things don't last. Not for people like me." Silas studied her, his eyes unreadable. "You think I brought you here just to throw you out?" "No, but I'm afraid that if I stay, I'll start to believe I deserve it. And then if it's taken away—" She didn't finish the thought. Silas leaned back in his chair. "You've already earned your place here, whether you believe that or not." Alma blinked quickly, the firelight blurred. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The next morning, the world was white. Snow had fallen in the night, blanketing the forest in silence. The children awoke with squeals and laughter, pressing their hands against the frosted windows. Alma bundled them up and watched as they tumbled out into the snow. She stood in the doorway, arms folded, her breath clouding in the air. Silas was chopping wood nearby, his axe rising and falling with slow precision. The sound echoed through the trees like a heartbeat. "Can we build a snowman?" Jonas shouted. "Let's make a family of them," Ellie added. Alma laughed. "Don't forget the carrot for the nose." Micah handed her a stick. "You can be the judge." She smiled, accepting it like a scepter. For the first time in years, her laugh felt like it belonged to her. But joy had a way of making fear louder. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Alma sat by the window, her thoughts heavy. She still hadn't told them everything. Not really. They didn't know about the merchant, the basement room, the papers he waved, the threats he made. They didn't know that she had been called a possession more than a person, that she had once believed she'd never be anything more than a transaction. She had told Silas about her infertility, and he had accepted it with a calmness that still shook her. But there were darker pieces she kept buried. parts of herself so bruised she wasn't sure they could ever be spoken aloud. She turned when she heard footsteps. Ellie stood in the hallway holding a blanket. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "The wind's too loud." Alma opened her arms. Ellie hesitated, only a moment, before walking over and curling beside her. They sat like that for a long time, the child leaning against her, both of them watching the snow fall. "Do you think you'll ever be our mother?" Ellie asked suddenly. Alma's breath caught. I don't know. I think I want you to be." Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I think I want that too," she whispered. Winter settled over the cabin with quiet authority. Days were shorter, the fire always burning. Alma taught the children how to knit and patch their own clothes. She baked more often, filling the air with cinnamon and cloves. The rhythm of their life moved like a song now, predictable, comforting. But outside the cabin, things were different. Whispers in town grew louder. Alma noticed the stares when she walked beside Silas at the market. She heard the women mutter behind their hands. "She just appeared one day. Never seen her family." "Don't you think it's odd?" Silas ignored it. But Alma felt it in her bones. The warning. She had escaped, yes, but her past was not done with her. One morning, as she helped Ellie measure flour, a letter arrived. A boy from the village handed it to her, eyes wide and curious. Alma's hands trembled as she took it. The seal was unfamiliar. Her name was scrawled across the front in a hand she didn't recognize. She opened it alone, behind the woodshed. The letter was short, but every word was a dagger. It came from the merchant's associate. He had tracked her. He knew where she was, and he was coming. Alma dropped the paper and leaned against the wall, her breath short and sharp. She had known this peace couldn't last. That night, she sat outside again, staring into the dark. Silas found her there. "What's wrong?" She handed him the letter. He read it, his face hardening. When he finished, he folded it slowly. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "I want to." "I'll protect you," he said. She looked at him. "You don't even know what I've done, where I come from. I know who you are here, and that's enough." The wind howled through the trees. Alma reached for his hand. "Then I'll stay." The stars above were brighter than she'd ever seen. The snow sparkled like it had been made just for them. And for the first time, Alma let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this place in the silence could be her home. The wind rattled the shutters that morning, more violent than it had been in weeks. Trees bent low under the weight of snow, and icicles clung to the edges of the roof like crystal fangs. Inside the cabin, the fire burned bright, casting gold against the wooden walls. Alma stirred a pot of stew while Ellie read aloud by the hearth, her voice soft and steady, her words curling into the air like steam. Lottie sat at Alma's feet, trying to tie one of her boots with the clumsy fingers of a child too small to know knots. Jonas and Micah wrestled with sticks just outside the front door, bundled in thick wool coats, their shouts muffled through the walls. It should have been a peaceful morning, like so many before. Alma had learned the patterns of this life, the comforting rhythm of days marked by chores and laughter and quiet moments with Silas beside the fire. She had begun to believe it would last. But peace rarely lasts forever for those who've run from something. Silas came in from the cold, stamping snow from his boots. His expression was tight, unreadable. He paused in the doorway, his eyes falling on Alma. She felt it before he said anything. Something had shifted. "There's someone in town," he said, asking questions. Her hands went still over the stew. Ellie stopped reading. Lottie looked up. "Who?" "Don't know yet, but he's not a traitor. Said he's looking for someone. A girl." Alma felt the blood drain from her face. The wooden spoon dropped into the pot with a quiet splash. "It's him," she whispered. "He found me." Silas crossed the room in 2 strides and gently took her by the shoulders. "You're safe here." "No," she said, backing away. "You don't understand. If he has papers, if he shows the sheriff, he'll say I stole from him, ran from a legal arrangement. He'll twist everything. Then we'll untwist it." Silas said firmly, "You don't know what he's capable of." "I know what I am," Silas said, "and I know this is your home now. Let him come." That evening, Alma couldn't eat. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold her cup. The children noticed. Ellie kept stealing glances. Jonas asked twice if something was wrong, and Micah sat beside Alma in silence, holding her sleeve. She kissed the tops of their heads but said nothing. There were no words strong enough to undo the fear that lived in her bones. The knock came the next morning. It was sharp and deliberate, not the hesitant tap of a neighbor. Silas opened the door slowly, and the cold swept in behind the man who stood there, tall and overdressed, with a smug look that told Alma everything before he even spoke. "There she is," he said, his eyes locking on her as if she were game caught in a trap. Alma stepped backward, her stomach twisting. "You're not welcome here," Silas said evenly. "I believe I am," the man replied, pulling a folded document from inside his coat. "I've come for my property." "She's not your property," Silas growled. "I have a legal agreement. Her father signed it. Her mother witnessed it. She was promised to me. I took her in, fed her, clothed her. And she ran. That's theft, sir." Alma spoke, her voice louder than she expected. "You lied. You never married me. You kept me like a servant. You said you'd sell me again." "I gave you shelter," the man snapped. "I saved you from the streets." "You bought me like cattle," she said. The children had gathered behind her. Ellie clutched Lottie's hand. Jonas stood with his fists clenched. Silas stepped forward. "You'll leave now." "Not until I have her. You'll have to go through me." The man narrowed his eyes. "You think the law won't side with me?" Silas didn't flinch. "The law doesn't matter when the truth is this loud." The man looked past Silas to Alma. "You can come quietly, or you can make it worse." Alma stood straighter than she ever had. "No, I'm not going with you. Not ever again." His lip curled. "You think this little cabin makes you safe. You're barren. Useless. No man would keep you if he knew what you really are. She's more of a mother than you'll ever understand," Ellie said suddenly, stepping forward. The man blinked. "She takes care of us. She makes us feel loved. She sings to Lottie when she's scared. She helped Micah learn to write his name. She's our family. And she's not going anywhere," Silas said, his voice cold and final. The merchant's face turned red. He looked at them all. The children, the man standing firm, the woman who was no longer afraid. Then he turned without a word and stormed off into the snow. No one spoke for a long time. Alma's knees gave out, and she sank onto the nearest chair. Her hands covered her face. She didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. She just breathed. Deep, gasping breaths like a person who had broken the surface after nearly drowning. Silas knelt before her. "He's gone," he said. "You're safe." "For now," she whispered. "For good," he replied. The next few days passed with a strange stillness. The children stayed close, especially Ellie, who shadowed Alma everywhere, eyes watchful. The cabin felt heavier, the air dense with words left unspoken. At dusk on the third day, Alma asked Silas to walk with her. They stepped into the snow, their boots crunching softly. The sky was pink and gray, fading into night. Pines loomed around them like ancient sentinels. "I've never said it all," Alma said finally. "You don't have to, but I need to," he waited. "My parents sold me, not just gave me away, but bargained me like livestock. They knew I couldn't have children. They didn't care. They just wanted to be rid of me. He promised to keep me fed, that was all. And I thought maybe I deserved that. You didn't. He locked me in a room. Told me I was nothing, that I'd never be wanted, that I should be grateful." Silas looked straight ahead. "I want to kill him." She smiled faintly. "You're not the only one." They walked in silence for a while. "You could have left me," she said. You could have just passed me on the road." "I've lost too much already," he replied. "I wasn't about to lose the one thing that made this place feel alive again." She stopped walking. "Do you mean that?" "I mean it," he said. "You're not here out of charity. You're here because this family is better with you in it. And I am too." Her breath clouded in the air. She stepped closer. "I've never had anyone choose me." "I'm choosing you now," he said. "Every day. As long as you want to stay." She pressed her forehead to his chest and closed her eyes. His arms came around her, strong and steady. The stars blinked awake above them. When they returned to the cabin, the children had left a note on the table. Written in messy handwriting was one simple sentence: "We made space for you in Mama's room." Alma walked to the doorway and looked in. The children had moved their toys, their books. A little handmade sign that said, "Our room," hung on the wall, with her name written in charcoal beneath it. She touched the wood, fingers trembling. That night she told them stories by firelight, not fairy tales, but real ones, of strength and survival, of choosing to live when it would have been easier to disappear. She ended with a promise: "I'm not leaving again." The children clapped. Silas smiled quietly. And for the first time in her life, Alma believed it. This was no longer a place she'd stumbled into by accident. It was her home, and she would fight to keep it. In a world that once told her she was worthless, Alma found the kind of love that asked for nothing but her presence. Not the love that comes with conditions or expectations, but the kind that grows quietly in the warmth of a cabin, in the laughter of children, and in the steady strength of a man who chose her, not for what she could give, but for who she was. She was no longer the girl who couldn't give life. She had become the woman who gave it back to a family who didn't even know they were waiting for her. If you were moved by Alma's journey from heartbreak to healing, don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Love Chronicles, where tales of resilience, romance, and redemption unfold with every new story. Click that bell icon so you'll never miss another powerful frontier love story filled with heart, grit, and the strength to start again. More unforgettable journeys are just around the bend.